Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by The Athletic. Today on the show, I'm joined by one of my friends over at The Athletic, James Edwards. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much, man. How are you?
Tired.
I have a question. When you send in the draft guide, I don't know if there's just like one final like send. This is it. Like, do you hesitate to send it, or like are you
Oh,
relieved to send it?
no.
Like you're
It's
not like
all relief.
okay,
All relief. Like I am just so happy to get that thing off of my plate.
okay.
And like there are going to be a couple of things where like I have to go back and like look through, and after I send it off in bunches throughout the year too. Like it's not like I'm just
That's what I
dumping
thought. Yeah,
130,000 words on Tyler's desk.
yeah.
It's more that I am just trying to, you know, find some time, and then I have to go through and edit it and look through, and yeah, it gets wild. It gets completely wild.
Well, we are all appreciative of
Yeah, well,
your work.
Lawrence has set a record. He's 150 pages into the draft guide. So I mean, I feel like that's a new record for people to reach. 150.
Shout out
Don't
to
think
you, Lawrence.
anybody's ever going to read the whole thing, because why would you? Just read for your guys. Like that's the important thing.
Yeah,
That's why it's there.
I bet you there's somebody that has.
It's a reference. That's the whole
That's
point of
fair.
why I do it. I don't do it for, everybody to read all 180 pages. I'm certainly not offended if people don't. Uh, okay, we're going to talk about three things today. So the first two things are more like national NBA things, because there seem to be these messaging wars going on across the league right now in terms of a number of different factors. So the first one is the Zion Williamson thing. Christian Clark over in New Orleans wrote a really interesting thing
Mhm.
on Lee Anderson, who is Zion Williamson's stepfather, who has been very involved in his career, as anybody will tell you who has covered Zion Williamson, even going back to the grassroots
Yeah.
stage. And then there's also this New York Times interview with Chris Paul, where Chris Paul wants everybody to clearly know that Isaiah Thomas is involved in basketball operations with the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
And that piece of it is really interesting. So I have a number of kind of thoughts on that. And then we're going to spend the last like 25 minutes of this show talking about the Detroit Pistons. This is a short one today. We're only going for 45 minutes because I have a couple of things I have to write. And also because I have another show I have to do after this, and going on with a good friend of the program, Mark Titus here,
Hey.
and kind of talking about a bunch of stuff. So let's start here. The Zion Williamson situation is like the most interesting one in the league to me, because here we have a player that very clearly is one of the 5 or 7 most talented players in the league,
Mhm.
has this very intriguing situation happening where there are literal like weight clauses written into his contract. There are injury questions here.
Yeah.
And yet when he's been on the court, he has been undeniably incredible. Like he averaged 27 and 6 and 4 or whatever
Mhm.
in his first 82 games of his career. I don't know what to make of Zion Williamson. We'll talk a little bit about like the messaging stuff in a minute here, but like I'm also kind of at the point where I buy that they're like actually going to look into moving him now. Um, I do.
Yeah, I do
And
too.
part of it's like the mechanics of the whole thing. Like they're about to get very, very expensive. They're about to get very, very cap constrained within this new CBA, because they already have CJ and Brandon Ingram on a max deal essentially with CJ. CJ is making like 35 this year, and has 3 more years left on a descending contract that eventually gets to 30. They have Brandon Ingram signed on his max deal for 2 more years. They have Zion Williamson signed on his max deal. They have Herb Jones contract situation, which is interesting. And I think that they can operate with Herb in a number of different ways. They can try and extend him this offseason. They can decline his player option and then like sign him to a like an Arenas limited contract.
Mm.
He can pick up the club option and then be eligible for like a little bit of a bigger contract where he's not Arenas limited on a bigger cap number with like a mid-level number. It's really interesting the number of ways they could do it, but he's about to get a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
Trey Murphy, I think, is a 9-figure player who's going to be making $25 million a year at some point. So this team is getting incredibly expensive in a hurry, which is why I understand this team's desire to try and move up to get Scoot Henderson, because he would represent a player that is locked in for 4 years on a relatively cheaper contract that probably gives you relatively similar upside to some of these players. So as I lay all of that out, James, I do kind of understand why they'd look into moving Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram, right? Like that lines up, right?
For sure. I definitely think so. I mean, we can start at Zion. Obviously, as you mentioned, when he plays, phenomenal. They were first place in the West in December.
Yeah.
They have a really good team, as you mentioned, because guys are either getting paid or about to get paid. But then there's also I think, very publicly obvious notion that New Orleans is kind of just fed up with Zion's lack of availability. And like, I just feel like I feel like I've gotten that sense, right? Just from reports that are like, what's been like, do you think I'm off base with that or no?
I can't tell how much they blame themselves or him. Like it seems like they're moving on from their training department. I believe that they've moved on from Aaron Nelson. And I think there's probably a piece where they're taking accountability for this themselves, but also certainly wish that Zion himself would be able to get on the court a little bit more, certainly. So yeah, like that piece of it is important here, I think, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could be wrong because he, like you said, he's one of the most talented players in the league when he plays, but I get the sense that Zion is maybe one more extended absence away in the somewhat near future from being like everybody's just kind of all set. Yeah. I think this is kind of like, aside from, I don't like using wake up call, but I think this has been a wake up call for him. And I also think it gives New Orleans a easy segue into finding out what they could get for Zion, because clearly the NBA is at a point where a lot of teams think they can go for it. Some teams that we didn't expect to have high picks have high picks. It certainly could be understandable why New Orleans would ask around, because I do think if you were going to trade him, and you hold your breath and cross your fingers and say your prayers if you do it, if you were going to trade him, now might be your last time before you end up so you don't end up like, not exactly Bradley Beal, of course, but where it's just not an absolute loss.
You might end up holding the bag.
Exactly.
At the end of the day. Yeah.
So
look,
a lot of people are at a crossroads right now, I think, is the situation.
Yeah. And look, here's the deal. Like, they're not going to offer Zion Williamson in a trade until it's done. You know what I mean? Like, this thing seems very, very, very fraught in terms of where teams are on him and the relationship between Zion Williamson and the team, right? And I think that as soon as you offer him in a trade and that gets out, or as soon as CAA, who is Zion Williamson's representation, finds out that he's been offered in a trade, then all bets are off and you probably have to make this move on some level. So I would imagine that right now they're maintaining the ability to deny that Zion Williamson's available, which I think they are. And that's very, very smart in terms of the way that they're going about it. Now, Christian Clark in New Orleans, I can't remember what paper he writes for. To be
great guy. Yeah, I forgot the name of the paper too right now.
Yeah, no, I met Christian earlier this year or last year at the Final Four. I can't remember. And he was awesome. He was like a great dude. Unbelievable.
Very good dude.
He wrote a thing today on Lee Anderson, basically explaining Zion Williamson's stepfather. And it doesn't paint the best picture of Zion Williamson and how involved he is in his own career, I guess I would say. And it also paints a picture of Lee Anderson like negotiating his contract, which Lee Anderson then denied. It just seems very odd to me. Look, Lee Anderson has always been like involved, like going back to high school with Zion Williamson. Like it's always been a thing. Like, Zion Williamson's stepfather is going to be a big part of the decision-making process for him.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of thought that once Zion got to the NBA, that would change, because most of the time what happens with players in the NBA is they kind of recognize that they are the people in power in their own lives.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that Zion like doesn't understand that here. I don't know, but they come to like a real understanding where they start to dictate things in a real way. And that's great. Like that's a normal, healthy process of A, turning 23 years old to 25 years old, and B, employing people like CAA, who is Zion's, very well established and well regarded agency, to make decisions and be able to negotiate and do things like this. So the fact that Christian wrote this thing on Zion Williamson, which actually Richard Lawler brings up in the YouTube comments. I feel like people don't mention that weird agent situation Zion had right before he got drafted, with some person claiming she'd signed him before his real agent. That definitely happened. There was a lawsuit.
I forgot about that.
And on top of it, as Christian talked about in this story, Chubby Wells was supposed to be Zion's agent, and reportedly, according to ESPN at the time, failed the agency test. And, Lee Anderson again denied that in Christian's story today. But that's, another thing that's out there. So the agency situation's always been weird. The situation around Zion has always been a bit bizarre. And the biggest thing that's always been a bit bizarre about Zion is the fact that everything has always been so secretive around Zion. And what I think this article actually like really delved into here is the fact that might be more of a Zion choice than like a New Orleans Pelicans choice.
That feels like it to me. Yeah.
That's intriguing to me. So like now it feels like the Pelicans are like putting things out into the open a little bit more and talking about things a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. This feels like, it feels like to me like this is hurtling toward, this could be the end of Zion in New Orleans, because I feel like when you start seeing stuff like this start to come out,
a trade soon follows.
Something like that follows a lot of the time, doesn't it?
It does. 100%. Like, I mean, I was very much looking forward to seeing where you were going with this, and I couldn't agree more. Like, I've gotten the sense since all this stuff just slowly starts kind of trickling out, like, I think he gets traded this week. I'm going to go. I have no sources in New Orleans about that situation.
Yeah. This is you speculating.
This is me as a fan who pays close attention to and reads everything. I think like it's close because like you said, you don't. If you're not going to trade him, you don't make sure that like there's any weirdness out there, and there's a lot of weirdness out there right now. And I would imagine it sounds like, I don't know if the relationships what they were prior to this, but like I can imagine it being just like probably very awkward if there are conversations between the front office and Zion's people right now. Like I don't even really know how to describe it. It just kind of feels like like the end of the road. Like you're in a relationship with a girl, you're ready to break up, so you just start like flirting with this girl you see at the bar, like getting to know her name and all these things. You don't go too far, but you're just like entertaining yourself, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like the end of a bad relationship where they know it's done, but nobody's done anything about it yet.
And what I'm trying to figure out is like what does he get in a trade? Because I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
Like I truly don't. You could tell me he gets like the number 2 overall pick because the Hornets are interested. Although I think Shams today reported that the Hornets are more interested in Brandon Ingram than Zion.
okay.
I also like. I don't know. Like did the Hornets move number 2 for Zion? Probably. I
Yeah,
think
probably.
like the Rockets, like do they move 4 for Zion?
I would.
I would too.
I would.
But do they move 4 in like Jalen Green for Zion?
That's the thing for me, right? So it's like I have no issue if you want to trade 2 through 4. Like I think I don't know if 5 would entice the Pelicans enough. Maybe I don't know. We'll just say 2. We'll say 2 through 5, whatever. It's what else? Like I'm fine with those being like the starting points, right?
Yeah.
But like, what else can New Orleans get? Like, what else are teams willing to comfortably give up? That's where I'm like, I think all of those teams would at least consider if it were just pick 2 for Zion. I think they would do it, right? I think New Orleans would do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, if they can get Scoot, I think they would. I think they'll
Right.
do. I think they want Scoot. Look, I don't know if they do Brandon Ingram for Zion. I don't know. Look, I don't know. Like, do they want more than 2?
That's what I
That's the
want to know.
thing.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Like, look, I know they really want Scoot, right? And that's very public at this point. But yeah, like I've kind of talked about on the show. Like, I think that's been a thing for a while in league circles that the Pelicans are very interested in Scoot. So, do you do like? Could you do like Jalen Williams? Like Jalen Green number 4 and like Tari Eason for 14 and Zion or something. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what the construction is because again, I think every team around the league has such a different valuation on
Right.
Zion at this point. And that's what throws me off.
Yeah, and that's what teams have to decide, right? Like the package you just threw out there. If Zion had played 60 plus games in every year of his career, that's not even close to enough, right? Of a trade. So the fact that he's averaging, 30 games a season, that might be generous. I don't remember. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Like, if I were a team, if I were Charlotte, I would say, okay, I'll do 2 for Zion. And like, that would be it. Like, don't ask me for anything else. I think that's about as far. If I was another team, I think that's as far as I would go. Risk for risk. You haven't seen this guy play. We all think he can be good, but we don't know. We haven't seen him play. Zion, we've seen him play. We know he's good. It's just, will he play? That's where I would, if I were a rival team, I wouldn't. And then maybe I'd miss out, but I don't know. Maybe they come back.
I mean, here's the really fun one, and I don't think they would do this because I think that they just had their contract situation is going to get wild in a hurry. Would Oklahoma City move like Josh Giddey or something for him? Like, would they move Josh Giddey in 12 for Zion?
That would be sick.
And you put Zion with Chet Holmgren and Shea and Jalen Williams and like let it rock.
That would be fun. And then like New Orleans gets the FU, we're sending you to Oklahoma City. Yeah. Because we all know that would be fun.
That's like the best idea, I think, to be
honest. I want OKC to just come out of nowhere. Yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah. Look, I don't think Oklahoma City would do that because I think Oklahoma City feels very happy with what they're building right now. Yeah. But like, I don't know, Oklahoma City is a very smart organization and they go for things from time to time. Like they are aggressive a lot of the time. So I don't know. Look, the Zion thing is just very strange. And that's where I'm at on it. Look, these things don't start coming out if there isn't like a real possibility that this could end in a trade. I don't know if it will or not. Like, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this week plays out. but I feel like this is now a thing to track, is where I'm at.
I'm with you 100%.
Okay. The Chris Paul thing real quick. Chris Paul did an interview with New York Times. Shout out Soap on Deb. He wants it to be known very clearly that Isaiah Thomas is involved with Matt Ishbia. So I'm just going to pull up Sopan's tweet real quick that he did, because he actually did the most important thing in the tweet, I thought.
Okay.
So you're on. Sopan asks them, "You're on the plane last night. The team that helped you get to within 2 games of the championship said it intended to trade you, and your feeling is what?" Chris Paul said, "It's tough. Seriously, it is part of the business. And what you realize is that no one owes you anything. No matter how you are with them or what you do, you realize that in this business, nobody owes you anything, as it should be. But when it comes through and my son texts me, I realize, Matt and Isaiah, I guess, just wanted to go in a different direction." So basically, Chris Paul found out he's getting traded from his son. And then on top of it, he feels very strongly that Isaiah Thomas was involved.
And I would tend to believe Chris if he was saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I don't think Chris Paul's going to lie about that for sure. And look, Isaiah Thomas sits next to Matt Ishbia like at every home game, right?
Yes.
Like it's a reality of the situation. And then
he hasn't tweeted as much.
Yeah, and like Sopan,
so.
Yeah, and Sopan went on to ask him, "I can see it in your face that you're trying not to talk too much trash right now." And Chris Paul said, "No, because like I say, it is what it is. But like I said, Matt and Isaiah must have wanted to go in a different direction." So he doubled down on it. Like he wants it clearly known, like abundantly clear that that Isaiah is involved.
Yes,
with Matt Ishbia at this point. And if you remember, I think it's a vet move for sure. If you remember when it came out that Isaiah Thomas was like almost going to get hired to like run the show.
Yep.
In Detroit or in Phoenix, like Matt Ishbia had to come out and say like that there is no role in the franchise for Isaiah Thomas. The quote was, "I don't read all the reports, but the way I look at it is this. Isaiah Thomas is a great friend of mine, and I have a lot of great friends," Ishbia said. "Isaiah Thomas is someone who knows basketball in and out. He's not someone I have in a role or have an established role with the Suns. There is no role for Isaiah at this time," but he did not deliberately say that like Isaiah wouldn't have a role at some point. And that was at his introductory press conference, because if you remember, like the Knicks Isaiah experience did not go well for myriad reasons.
League zigged, he zagged.
Well, not only in terms of
Rosillo.
Yeah, look, not a shout out Ryan, but like
shout out to Ryan.
Not only in terms of the on-court product did it not work with Isaiah, but it also, there were a number of off-court issues with the Isaiah Thomas New York Knicks run that included the Inuka Brown Sanders debacle, which I want to get this right when I kind of pull it up here. Let's see here if I can find this. Where am I at here? I
think that was due to that caused some of the backlash as well.
Yeah, so she filed a sexual harassment lawsuit against New York Knicks general manager Isaiah Thomas and Madison Square Garden. The suit claimed that Isaiah Thomas sexually harassed her, starting with his hiring, and then the suit claimed that her firing was essentially like in retaliation for the complaints about the harassment. And then, by the way, in October of 2007, the jury returned a verdict finding Thomas and Madison Square Garden liable for sexual harassment. And it levied a $11.7 I think it was 11.5 is what ended up getting paid $1 million in damages. So look, I could understand why people were very upset about the Isaiah Thomas situation potentially in Phoenix. I think it's very reasonable to be upset about it.
100%.
Matt Ishbia needs to like rein it in here a little bit on the Isaiah Thomas front.
There were two things from the quote you read from his press conference where when he doubled down, he said there's not an established rule.
Yeah.
Which was a word that caught me. And then obviously, like you said, at this time. So we've heard of advisors and such. This is very much what this seems like. I have no reason to believe Chris is making up a fib in throwing Isaiah in there. Like very clearly wanted it to be known and with intention. Who's running the show there. So interesting. It is very interesting on many fronts. Just Phoenix is I'm sure Suns fans are having fun maybe, or it's been entertaining for all of us. But this thing could, if it doesn't work, we could be looking at one of the most like epic collapses in recent, like this could be worse than Big Three Brooklyn Nets.
It could be. I don't think it will be. Like I think that Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are so good that it's going to be fine.
Yeah. But
if this doesn't work and like they continue to get hurt and Bradley Beal continues to get hurt, and by they I shouldn't throw Devin Booker in there. He missed 15 games this year or 20 games this year or whatever, but not an injury prone guy. If these guys continue to get hurt though, there's a real downside here. And it will involve the end of the Devin Booker era in Phoenix if this thing goes as poorly as it could. Now, I'm higher on the Bradley Beal deal for Phoenix than most because I think that they gave up nothing for him, essentially.
Right.
Like Chris Paul, all due respect, like Bradley Beal's better than Chris Paul at this point. And you also just gave up Landry Shamet and a couple of second-round picks, and you got Jordan Goodwin back, who, like I said yesterday, frankly, like I think Jordan Goodwin has a better chance to play in a playoff series than Landry Shamet. I don't know if he can, but I think that he is a better.
There's stuff there. Yeah.
There's stuff there. Yeah. So like you essentially got Bradley Beal for Chris Paul and like the willingness to take on a bunch of money. And that speaks to something that Brian Windhorst wrote today, where I guess that sources are telling him that the goal for the Suns moving forward is basically just to like blow through the second apron and like put a stress test on the CBA from a financial perspective, basically, and on Matt Ishbia's bank account, probably. But their goal is they're just going to pay, and they're going to give like Jock Lawndale and Torrey Craig like slightly higher contracts than what they typically give, it seems like, in order to retain them, and then look to potentially move them because it could open up future movement opportunities in trades. If you guys, if they give Jock Lawndale $10 million, right? Jock's probably worth $5 million a year. I would say he's a good backup center.
Right.
But if you give him 10, you can move him, especially if it's a 2-year deal with a team option on the end of it. So yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm this experiment now just became incredibly interesting from a team building perspective, I think.
And that's where I was going to go with it. Like whenever these super teams, quote unquote, get built, the fascinations with always, is it going to work? Is it this, like the basketball side, as it should be, right? I'm genuinely fascinated, like you said, with the art of team building and the crash and burn ability of what Phoenix is doing. Like it is absolutely, I am so excited to find out how they fill out the roster and who they fill it out with. Like it's going to be, I think that we are literally going to see something that we have never seen before.
Oh, like three. Yeah, it's basically going to be like 3 stars and a bunch of minimum-ish guys. Like Torrey Craig and Jock Lawndale will be there, but yeah.
I don't think we've seen it to this degree. Maybe I'm wrong. That we're going to see
I don't know. Maybe, but like even the first year of the Heat with Dwayne Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh. Like they had Mike Miller and Battier, right? No, the first year
Yeah.
didn't have Mike Miller, right? I think that the second year got Mike Miller.
Yeah, maybe it was the
But they had
second year.
Battier for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe
I'm just
maybe that doesn't count.
But like they have to get like 8 minimum guys. I don't know. Maybe it's been a while, but I'm fascinated by that to see one, like who emerges. Like maybe there's that Austin Reeves of next year comes from Phoenix, to see if depth can become a thing with them taking all these minimum guys. If guys are gonna, would guys rather take the minimum to go play with the Suns or the minimum to go play with Denver? I'm fascinated by that too. So it's unique. I don't know. It's not my money, so I don't care. But if it was my money, I'd be thinking twice about what Phoenix is doing if I was running the show.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, I'm recognizing now as I talk about this, shout out to JJ. They can't actually give Jock Lawndale 10 million, but they're going to overpay for him is the point. They're going to give him like, whatever they can essentially to give them like more flexibility moving forward.
I like this deal more if they didn't trade for KD. I know that's been said before. Like I love KD, but like I don't.
Well, the deal doesn't happen if they don't trade for KD, right?
Right, for sure. But I'm just saying, like, if we could move things around,
yeah,
I would like a Booker, Bridges, Johnson,
Beal
would be fun, of course. But it's going to be fun with KD. I'm not saying that he's the best player of the three. I just feel like from a team building perspective, I would have liked it more like that if there was any plausible way, but they wouldn't have known back then, obviously.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Okay. Next up, let's talk about the Pistons.
Let's do it.
We wrote a thing today on the NBA draft in regard to the Detroit Pistons. And I get the impression that Pistons fans are a bit worried about the draft on Thursday.
Everybody has their corners and they're standing in it on Pistons Twitter.
That's what I feel like too. Like, look, like I'm firmly in, like if Cam Whitmore gets there, like I would take Cam Whitmore and just not think twice. But I'm also higher on Cam Whitmore than like most people seem to be. I'm fascinated with what they do. And the reason I want to talk about the Pistons like during draft week is because A, they have this incredibly interesting draft cycle coming up, but B, they also have like they're one of the most interesting teams this offseason because they touch all parts of the offseason.
Yep.
Like they're going to be in the mix for restricted free agents. They're going to be in the mix for unrestricted free agents. They're going to be in the mix on draft night with pick number 5. Like there's just so many different things that they have at their disposal. Like they could, potentially try and move up. I don't think they will try and move up on draft night. But they certainly could try and move down.
Yep.
So I'll give you the floor. You're more connected in Detroit than I am, certainly. I'll just ask you, like, where do you think this is going, basically?
So, and we've talked about it a decent amount over the last 24 hours. When you ask that, do you mean like the draft specifically, or just the end? Like, what does the end of the offseason look like, or both?
That's a great question. I didn't have a direction.
I'll do both.
Okay.
As it pertains to the draft, of course, everybody this time of year that have some type of plugged into the league or reporters, whatever, you get information overload. And of course, I'm hearing information, you're hearing information, our colleagues hearing information. You have to sift through it all, hope that the people that are telling you these things, the ones you have relationships with, aren't like trying to get one over on you. That you're not being used as a smokescreen and things like that. Like that's part of the game, but it would also be disingenuous to say like it's also something that people do. Like it's just part of the game, right?
Yeah.
So over the last 24 hours, I've gotten the sense that Whitmore doesn't seem to be in the cards. And again, could be smokescreen, could be the case. I heard he didn't have a great workout. And there was a bunch of guys grouped in there. in that kind of. I think there's like 5 guys that I think they'd really consider, and then watch him draft Anthony Black after all. You know what I mean? Like it's just how
Well,
it
no,
goes.
watch them draft Cam Whitmore after this,
Or
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
exactly.
what they would do. Like that'd
Right.
be hilarious.
Exactly.
Just watch them. Just be like, yeah, we're taking Cam Whitmore.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it is complicated. Trying to sift through all this because all all of the teams in that range, right, from even 4 down through 9, there are just a number of different ways that the draft could go at this point. And there's this big group of players in that little bubble there, from the Thompson twins to Cam Whitmore to Jarris Walker to Taylor Hendricks to Anthony Black as well. And yeah, I was going to say, like, to me, I've not heard much Anthony Black for them at number 5.
Yeah,
like
same.
at all, which makes sense because they have Cade Cunningham, and they have certainly Jaden Ivey as well. Yeah. It is interesting. You mentioned earlier in the thing that we wrote that Taylor Hendricks is a guy that came in and had a good workout in Detroit. I do like the idea of them trading down to try to get Taylor Hendricks the more I think about it. And I do like the idea of them trading down to like try and get like Asar Thompson at like 7 or 8 or so. If there is a guy that like the team at 5 wants.
Yeah.
By the way, like I would take Cam Whitmore at 5 and just not twice if Cam Whitmore gets there. But in like the way that I tend to think about things from an NBA draft perspective, because as you know, that everything is always so smoky this time of year in terms of information. I always just tend to think of things like, okay, what is the decision that would make the most sense? Right. Yeah. And it's not always that for every team. Like you can make a case that Cam Whitmore, like they just don't want to build around a wing that doesn't really pass and everything. Right. Or you could make a case that, Cam Whitmore is the kind of incredible athlete that would fit incredibly well next to Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey and next to Cade Cunningham's, half court dominance and ability to throw headman passes and everything. Like you can do all of this, right? Like you can come to so many different conclusions. And I think that's what makes the Pistons hard, because I can come to like 6 different conclusions for them.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
100%.
And I'm trying to figure out like where I fall on it. It's funny, like the name I've gotten the most, I wrote this in the thing. The name I've gotten the most from people is Jarris Walker. I can't tell if that is just people connecting like the Troy Weaver and Monty Williams, like DMV dots, because Jarris is from Baltimore. Cam Whitmore is also a DMV guy, so like it's possible that's like a dot that's being connected for people as well. I can't tell. Like how realistic these things are, or is it just like people across other organizations doing the same thing we are, frankly, in terms of intel, trying to connect dots and figure out like, hey, what are they going to do here at number 5?
Yeah, and that's the tough part. And like to be fully transparent, like when it comes to draft, when I talk to people in or around the team, up to now, I don't feel like I've ever been used as a smokescreen. I think like a lot of the stuff I put out has helped. But with that said, if there was a year to put out some smoke screens, this would be the year, right? 100%. Yeah. So like, I've gotten the sense in the last few days that Asar Thompson, and you've met, and I think we talked about it. There are teams, and it might not just be Detroit if it's the case. There are teams who have Asar above Amon.
Yeah.
Like it's more than one.
Yeah.
And I've just gotten the sense that they like him. There are people who really like him. Jarris is, he's a Detroit guy. Like very much would fit into what Detroit wants to build culturally, aside from the playmaking and the quick twitch, like athletic, getting off the ground, the jumps and stuff like that, the potential with the shot. But with that said, you just never know, because Cam Whitmore makes sense too. So I don't know. You hear things, you just trust your relationships and the people who tell you, and You're not going to shoot 100%. But as of right now, I genuinely feel like it's between the Thompson twins and Jarris Walker at 5, if they stay at 5.
Well, and that's the crazy thing, because what would you say that the Pistons need more than anything right now from a skill set perspective?
I would say a like 3-and-D wing.
Yeah, I would say they need shooting more
Right.
than anything.
Yeah.
To be honest, like
Mhm.
shooting and defense, right?
Yeah.
And you can make a case that like that ticks the Jarris Walker box. Like
Mhm.
if you believe in Jarris Walker shooting, I'm a little bit lower on it, but like if you evaluate it differently than I do, I think you can come up to a world where that makes sense.
And he
If you
plays
believe
with
that he will
Isaiah
shoot.
Stewart and Jalen Duren.
Yeah.
If they don't do anything yeah.
And that's again, like, and you have reported that they want to extend Isaiah Stewart,
Yes,
which
that is my belief.
I think that makes total sense as well.
Mhm.
I don't love the idea of those two being like on the same roster. Like, I guess you could get like 55 minutes of them together, or
Yeah.
like 55 minutes of them on the court.
Yeah.
Maybe play them a little bit together, but not much.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then Asar and Amen, like they don't really shoot.
Mhm. No.
And that's like not what the Pistons need.
No. Especially if they're going to, either one's going to play more off ball in Detroit than they would in other. Definitely, obviously, Asar would,
Yeah.
but Amen, I would imagine they're still not taking the ball to Cade's hands.
Oh God. I mean that's the other thing that throws me
Yeah.
off. Like you can't take the ball out of Cade Cunningham's hands.
And I don't
Like
think they will. Yeah.
Yeah. Diminishing returns on that, like on numerous levels. So like we didn't really write about this. Like
Mm.
if Amen is gone, and I don't know, I think that I think it's between him and Cam at 4.
Mhm.
We'll see what they do. But if Amen is not gone, how do you think they would evaluate Amen?
I could be wrong. I was told this weekend that Asar, of the 5 guys I said that were in consideration at 5, so Asar, Amen, Jarris, Taylor, and Cam, I was told that there are people high in the organization that like Asar the most of that group.
Okay.
Could be us again. That's just what I was told by people I.
Well, and look,
trust.
like we need to be real about this too. Like the Detroit front office, like
We've talked about it before. It doesn't do groupthink.
Yeah,
too.
they don't do groupthink, and then there are also like people who think very differently about basketball than one another within that front office.
Yes.
Right. There are different factions within the front office who think very differently about basketball, and it's not a bad thing. Like you come to a conclusion.
In a way. It can be. Yeah.
Yeah,
can be
you make decisions, but just because one high-ranking person thinks one way doesn't mean that the other person will. And then there will be decisions that get made. So it's complicated in that regard. With Asar, I do get it for them. If you think he's going to shoot, I think you can make a case he's the best pick. If you think he's going to shoot.
And would you say it's fair to say he's even further along as a shooter now than Amen, right?
He's definitely further along.
Yeah, he's definitely further along. I didn't want to use the word definitely, but like that's how I felt. Yeah.
I don't know that either of them are really shooters.
No,
but
yeah,
I think that he's further along than Amen.
No,
I think Cam Whitmore is ahead of both of them, which is why I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, why would you not just take Cam Whitmore at the end of the day? But we'll see. Like maybe Cam's not there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I have this. I don't know. Taking Jarris Walker when you have Isaiah Stewart and you have Jalen Duren and you have all these dudes, because I think Jarris is like a 4. I don't really think he's a 3. It doesn't totally line up to me, which is why I'm thrown with why I keep getting Jarris at 5,
right,
for them.
And maybe people say because they're going to trade Isaiah. Maybe I have not gotten the sense by any means that they will trade Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, if I knew everything, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be playing the lotto some stuff people tell you that changes and things that don't, but I don't know. I think they can go many different ways, and they could, like you said earlier, like they could view Jerace as more of a wing going forward.
I think that's the big question. Do they view Jarris Walker as more of a wing? If they do, that could be how this kind of gets thrown a little bit. If they view Cam Whitmore as like not a great shooter, maybe that could be a thing. If they view Asar Thompson as like a true wing with shooting upside, like that could be a thing. There's enough wiggle room between all of these guys where I think that there's some really interesting like factors that could play in here. Again, the last thing you brought up is that Taylor Hendricks had a really good workout there. The funny thing is that Hendricks' skill set is the one that fits best out of all these guys, because Hendricks can really shoot. He can defend at a really high level, both on and off the ball.
Can do 3-4.
Can play the 3 and the 4. I wonder if there is a world where they can move down, like them being able to move down to like 8 or 9 and getting one of these guys is like my ideal world. But because there are essentially 9 guys within the top 9, and Anthony Black is one of them, and you have Anthony Black at 8, you're basically praying that the Wizards take Anthony Black at 8 at that point and let one of Asar, Hendricks, Jarris, or Thompson or Cam Whitmore fall to 9. Yeah, basically.
While getting there's that pick that they owe to Houston or I think the Knicks have, I don't remember who has it, that's kicked down the road. If you can add a few, like the Pistons need to add another future pick or two, not even just a draft, but for even just trade purposes. Like if I had to put my stamp on it now, they move back. That's just how I feel. And then they pick whoever's left. It's just a matter of, do Utah, who's 7, Indiana, do they like anybody enough? Or will they be happy just sitting back and getting whoever falls to them? Because I could see that. We've talked about, I'm not in love with this class. And the group that we've talked about, like maybe everybody's just like, okay, whoever falls is who we'll take. We like this guy, that's all right.
I kind of love that idea to move back. Like if they want Hendricks specifically, I think they probably can't go below 7 for what it's worth.
Okay.
Because I think Indiana is like a very real threat to take him. If they want just one of those guys and they feel very strongly that Washington is going to take Anthony Black, then you could move down to 9 and do it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's tricky. That's a really, really tough one. We only have like 5 minutes until I have to go to another commitment, but where are you on Pistons free agency?
I reported a few months ago that they would look into bringing Jeremy Grant back. It sounds like from just the reports I've seen that Jeremy's probably going to stay in Portland. Assuming they don't trade Dame or something happens. It's very clear. We've talked about it from a draft perspective. They need a wing. I think they throw the house at Cam Johnson. Not the house, but they go make Brooklyn sweat at Cam Johnson. I think that's the first order of business. Like I would assume, and we know we've covered this league long enough. They know if they can get Jeremy Grant by now, or if they probably they know what Portland's probably doing. They know all that. So assuming Jeremy's going to go back to Portland, I think they really try to make a run at Cam.
I think Cam makes sense. The other name that I've kind of gone into this offseason thinking was off the table because I thought Washington was just going to re-sign him, and then Washington let go of Tommy Shepard and seems to be making a full organizational pivot now. Kyle Kuzma ticks a lot of boxes for them.
He does. People ask me about him. I like Kuzma. I'm obviously biased. Shout out to Flint, Michigan. He was tremendous last year. I thought he was really good. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if he strikes me as like a guy Troy Weaver really wants. I don't know. I don't know. I think we would all agree Kuzma's a good player, but I don't know if he checks Troy's box. I don't know that. I don't know that,
Yeah.
but maybe.
I think Cam Johnson makes more sense for them, to be honest, but you just don't know if you can get Cam Johnson
Exactly.
because of the restricted free agency aspect.
And you have with Kuzma, at least, like, you're going to have to pay, but you do have the Michigan thing. Like, he would love to play at home, I'm sure.
Oh, I bet he would. Like, I bet he'd be ecstatic about it. And I bet that, I'm sure Cam Johnson will be happy with 28 million or whatever they have to offer him to like get him to make this an actual decision. Right.
Right. What's a walk away number for you for Cam Johnson? I've had this discussion with people.
I think it's got to be like 28 a year. Like, and that's like a wild number for him. I think he's a really good player, but I think 28 is like a pretty crazy number.
Yeah.
I think if it's 25, you're talking about Brooklyn probably just retains him and tries to use him as an asset, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I had said, like, if you're absolutely desperate and you have a mandate to be in the play-in next year and Cam Johnson's the best player available, I said I think I would maybe go to 30 to get it done.
Yeah.
Just depends on
I don't for him.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't know if that's this. I don't believe that's the circumstances for the Pistons next year. They hope that happens, but I don't think it's like a mandate. But certainly, yeah, I think there are a lot of people who think that Cam is like, I shouldn't say a lot of people, a lot of Pistons fans who think Cam is like going to get like above 30. I think high 20s is the absolute cap for what I would pay for him. Good player. He's a good player when he has other good players around him. And obviously the Pistons are hoping and believing that they have several good young players. It's just, they're still in the process of making sure their guys are good first, right? Before they make a big splash.
Yeah, I mean that's the key. Like with them moving forward, is they're trying to figure out like what they have with their actual dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't have anything with those guys, I think they do for what it's worth. But if they don't have anything with those guys, it becomes harder. Mm-hmm. Last thing, their fallback options we think are hopefully like Gary Trent, who we're gonna have a decision on today. It seems like, 'cause he has to decide on the player option.
Oh yeah.
And the interesting thing with Trent is like there's the player option that he has to make a choice on, but they can also like opt into the player option and then like extend off of the player option in a way that, like, look, Gary Trent's probably not getting more than like 22 a year or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you can do 3 years, 65 or whatever on top of it. Mm-hmm. I think that's the number. It's right in that ballpark. Yeah. So we'll find out if he's even going to be on the market today. We're going to, Dylan Brooks is an option. I think that Houston feels, seemingly, at least given the betting markets, like Dylan Brooks is a very real potential outcome in Houston. I'm trying to figure out like who the other options are.
I've talked about some lower tier guys, like if things absolutely go south, just to fill out the roster. Like, I had Torrey Craig on there until I assume he goes back to Phoenix. I think Yuta Watanabe would be a good pickup.
love that we're into the Yuta zone.
It's really not a great it's not a great class. I'm just trying to think of like good wings, like
Harrison Barnes maybe.
Yeah, if you could get Harrison cheap, I don't think that's a bad like plan C or D.
Yeah, it's intriguing. Like,
pro.
Yeah, I'm interested. Who did you say?
I said he's a pro and fills a void. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if it's just like 1 year deal, just give him one more big payday. Just to get through this year.
Yeah. God, can you imagine watching a Killian Hayes, Dylan Brooks bench unit?
Don't you wish that upon me?
Just an inefficiency smorgasbord.
Just all the jump shots that are going to go up. I really don't. Dylan Brooks, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I really don't want to have to watch Dylan Brooks play basketball 82 straight games.
Oh my God.
Sure, he's a nice guy. Impact's winning. Can't watch the shot selection every single day.
No, it's tough. Okay, James, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what you've got coming up.
I'm on Twitter at JL Edwards III, as in James Edwards III, or J. What is my Twitter? JL Edwards III. Sorry.
Yeah.
Follow me at The Athletic. Check the Pistons tab. It's draft week, so You can check mine and Sam's piece up right now, where we bounce ideas with the Pistons at number 5 back and forth. I'll have like a Pistons draft guide. I'll be at the draft in New York, so hopefully chat with whoever they pick. And then, yeah, summer league's around the corner. Are you going to go to Vegas?
I am going to Vegas this year. I get in on July 5th. So
I'll
that
see you
will
out
be
there.
good. I will see you out there, man. Okay, this has been fun. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe, do everything you can to support the show. Just go read the draft guide, go subscribe to The Athletic, do all that stuff.
Go read it.
Until next time, we will talk soon.